In this video, we're going to look at the permission system in Scouts RAM. Now, if you are an administrator, you can now set up user groups and set permissions for each of these user groups. If we go to the Settings menu and to User Groups, here we can create new user groups and set their permissions. Scouts RAM comes with 3 inbuilt permission groups, and that is Administrator, who has access to absolutely everything, Editor, who can do everything apart from create new users and user groups, and then View Only, who can only view risk assessments and risks. But we can now create custom user groups. So if we go ahead and click Add New User Group, we can give the group a name, for example, Beaver Leaders. And we now have several options. So we can create either an allow list or a block list for both categories and sections. So if we use the allow list, then any user within this user group will only be able to create and edit risk assessments with the specified categories. Any other risk assessment which has a category not on the allow list will appear as read only. Now if we use the block list, then the user will be able to access every risk assessment unless its category is in the block list. So for example, we might want to block this user from editing any of our COVID risk assessments. So they will now be able to create and edit any risk assessments or risks they like, so long as they don't use the categories in the block list. We can do the same with the section access. So for example, this group is for Beaver Leaders, so we might want to restrict them to only creating and editing items that come under the section of Beavers. Down at the bottom, we can also restrict access to the risk library. So we can either give edit access or read only access to the risk library. So if we select read only, then these leaders will not be able to create any new risks or edit any risks, but they will be able to build risk assessments by selecting risks that are already in the library. Similarly, we could turn off access to risk assessments. So in this case, with read-only access to the risk library and read-only access to risk assessments, any leaders within this group would only be able to pick from pre-made risk assessments to populate a program. So once you have set up your user group, simply click Save. And then we can now go to the Leader Access tab and assign leaders to this user group. So now if we switch to this user account, and now if we go into the risk library, we can now see that all these risks are read only. So they cannot edit any of these risks as they do not fall under the categories or the sections which they are allowed to edit. So they can copy risks, but before they are allowed to copy it, they must specify a new section, as they are not allowed to edit the Scout section, but they can create this risk under the Beaver section, and then click Save. And see, we now have a copy of this risk for the Beaver section, which they can now edit and use as they wish. So if we go and create a new risk assessment, so we can now see that they can use any category they like, but the specific COVID categories which we blocked are not available for them to use. But in the section list, as they are only allowed to create and edit under the Beaver section, they will only see the Beaver option, and if they try and edit and add any other section, they will not be allowed to. So that is how we can create permission groups within Scouts RAM.